Air resistance and terminal velocity. When an object falls, gravity is pulling down on it, and so it's picking up speed. It's accelerating down due to gravity. But as it gains speed, air resistance becomes a factor. And you know that if something's moving faster, there's more air resistance, because you know if you stick your hand out the window of a car while you're driving along at 5 or 10 miles an hour, you just feel a little breeze. 5 or 10 miles an hour relative speed between your hand and the air. But if you're driving at 60 miles an hour and you stick your hand out the window, you feel a significant force on your hand. So air resistance becomes larger. The force due to the air resistance becomes larger at higher speeds. So imagine an object falling. It's picking up speed, but as it gains speed, the force of the air resistance becomes larger and larger. And that force tends to keep it from accelerating. Eventually, the object, if it falls far enough, it will pick up enough speed such that the force due to air resistance will keep it from getting any more speed. At that point, it has reached the maximum speed, and the force due to the air resistance at that point is equal to its weight, and the net force in that case is zero, and so it won't accelerate anymore. At that point, it's said to be moving at terminal velocity. And by terminal, just think final. That's the final speed that it's going to reach. It's not going to get any more speed than that. And you might ask, well, how fast is that? How fast will something go if it falls? Well, it depends on the object. An object, like we talked about a rock and a feather falling earlier, a feather just floating down has a very low terminal velocity because it very quickly reaches a point where the air resistance is enough to keep it from gaining any more speed. The relevant question might be, how fast would I fall? Or how fast would you fall if we jumped out of an airplane, say we're skydiving? Well, it depends. If you have your arms and legs spread out, like skydivers sometimes do, then you spread out such that you expose a lot of your body to the oncoming air, the air that you're falling into. And that gives you more air resistance. And in that case, your terminal velocity is about 120 miles per hour. And skydivers usually do that because they're skydiving for fun and they want the ride to last a while, so they spread their arms and legs out in a configuration that will make them go as slow as possible. 120 miles per hour doesn't really sound slow, but that's about as slow as a typical adult can go in free fall in the atmosphere. Now, if you want to gain speed, you could aim down, kind of dive down, tuck your arms and legs back, such that you're heading straight down really fast. And in that configuration, or in that orientation, you would get up to a speed of about 180 miles per hour. And you can see that if you're nosing down like that, you're exposing less area of yourself directly to the air. Now, if you fall with a parachute, the parachute is designed to have a very high drag. It's designed to catch a lot of air. And so you might be here, holding onto the parachute and falling down. Because the parachute has such a large area here to catch the air, it moves very slowly. The terminal velocity for a parachute is slow, and exactly how slow depends on the parachute. You can obviously land at a slow enough speed to not get hurt. If you hit the ground at these speeds, it would be fatal. But with the parachute, you can land and not get hurt. Modern parachutes are effective enough to allow a person to make a gentle landing standing up. Military parachutes tend to be smaller, and you tend to fall much faster if you're in a military parachute. And there's a good reason for that. If you're jumping out of a plane and landing in enemy territory, you don't want to be hanging up there in the air very long, where you're just hanging there and people can shoot at you. The enemy has got you in plain sight. There's no cover, no wall or anything you can hide behind. You're just floating there in the air. just a sitting duck basically. So military parachutes are designed to get you down as fast as possible, and they hit the ground really hard. It's equivalent to jumping out of a second-story window, the impact speed. And if they don't land just right, they have a special procedure where they hit and roll and spread the impact out over a large area of their body, and that allows them to hit without injury. If they don't land correctly, they could very easily have broken ankles, broken legs. So they land a special way to land at high speeds. So exactly how fast you fall with a parachute depends on the type of parachute. But in all of these cases, you fall and you reach a speed where you won't go any faster due to the air resistance, and that's called the terminal velocity. Now, the one point of confusion that some people have about this: if you're falling at terminal velocity and the weight is equal to the force, or the force of air resistance is equal to the weight, those forces are equal, and the net force is zero, then why don't you stop? Some people ask. If the net force is zero, shouldn't you simply stop? Well, the net force being zero doesn't mean that your velocity is zero. It means that your acceleration is zero. So the way to think about it is to imagine the whole process. If you jump out of the airplane, and so here you are falling through the air. At first, right when you jump, your speed downward is zero, and so the air resistance is zero. So then you start to fall, you get up some speed, and that causes a little bit of air resistance. So because there's a little bit of air resistance, you're not accelerating quite as fast, but you're still accelerating. So you gain some more speed, and that causes a little bit more air resistance, and that means you don't gain quite as much. You're not accelerating at 9.8 anymore, but you're still accelerating. Eventually, you reach enough speed downward that the air resistance up doesn't let you gain any more speed. It doesn't all of a sudden make you stop, though. So you gain speed until the air resistance is equivalent to the weight. And at that point, you simply don't gain any more. You simply move at terminal velocity.